Hey everyone, good morning. Welcome to Rhino Exploration. My name is Zach. Today we are working in the garage, I should say my parking garage here at my apartment complex. We are working on putting in some auxiliary switches so I can hook up more lights to the Jeep and in the future have the ability to hook up other things like my winch and stuff, which is all back on the mainland at the moment. So right now I am figuring out how I want to mount it all. I'm laying out all the parts, figuring it out. It may get a little loud in here because it is a parking garage near a main street, so bear with me, but hope you guys enjoy the video. So let's get started. Parking garage at my apartment complex, installing an AUXBEAM switch panel system into the Jeep today. So I got this AUXBEAM system off of Amazon. It's an 8 switch system. It came with the circuit component that everything hooks up into, 3 different mounting brackets to help with the mounting solution, so you had a more universal way of mounting both the switch panel in the Jeep and the control module underneath the hood, and it came with all the wiring that you need to get it up and running within the Jeep. And the instructions were pretty good. They weren't super detailed, but they were pretty good at telling you what you had and how to hook it all up in the Jeep. Alright guys, right now I'm just figuring out my dilemma of how I want to mount it. They give you this lovely mounting bracket with the AUXBEAM system, which is fantastic, but there's very limited space to mount this in the Jeep, and the places that you can, the power cords they give you to hook it up to the battery aren't quite long enough, and I don't have long enough power cords to hook up to it for other things. So figuring it out at the moment. I've got my cover for the fuse box, which I used to have the S-Pod hooked up here, which that's a whole nother story, but that's what these holes are. I have another fuse cover, so this one's kind of my dummy test cover, figuring out it. But so I'm lining things up, kind of trying to figure it out. If I close the hood, will it touch? If I mount it here, how will it go? So just kind of figuring it out at the moment. But so far I've really enjoyed the system. It's got 8 switches, lights are green. Eventually I'll add the stickers and stuff that I want to it, but yeah, fighting a dilemma. So I did this install in the parking garage of my apartment complex. It isn't the greatest place to do an install, I will admit. It is super loud, it's busy, and all my stuff has to be with me right there, and I don't have a lot of space to spread it all out, so it feels very, very cramped. But it is in the shade. It is a place to work on the Jeep, and I can't always get to my buddy Trevor's house to work on it, so when I can work on it, I'm going to. Alright guys, so we are mocking this up at the moment. Drilled my holes where I wanted them. Now we're just going to screw this in and mock it up, so I can see if I like how it looks and if it'll close under the Jeep hood. Alright guys, so we got this slightly mocked up here. I just drilled some holes and put the bolts through and just screwed them in because the holes were just big enough for the bolts. So I don't have them bolted them down, but now we're going to see if when I put the battery box on, or when I put this back over the fuse panel, will it fit nicely, and I put the thing on top, will the hood close without touching? So let's find out. I feel like it's touching it, just so. Let's find out here. it's just touching it. I think we've got it just in a perfect spot underneath the hood. So this is how I had it mocked up, sitting as far back on the bracket as it can, so I can still put the wires up under here to connect it into the box. And this is just screwed in at the moment. I may have to eventually make something that holds the bracket up a little bit better, but at the current moment, when the hood closes, when I close the hood on the Jeep, it actually doesn't touch the box at all. This just misses, this doesn't touch, so it sits nicely. Nothing is actually touching it, so I think that's where we're going to keep it for now. We can always change it later. Alright guys, I've pulled this back out. We're going to undo my mock setup here. Make sure we grab the bolts and everything on my kind of custom made workbench, which is just a cement pillar here in the parking garage. So you can see the Jeep's right there. So now what I'm going to do for this part is I'm going to button this up and I'm going to bolt this on. So this part will be done at the moment, and then we're going to start figuring out where I want to stick everything inside the Jeep. I have an area that I want to put it, and it's just got to do a little fabrication or drilling to tap it to where I want it to go. So we're going to figure that out next after I tighten this all. Yes, I know you're all probably thinking, why are you putting this on the fuse cover to the fuse box? Well, originally I had an S-Pod hooked up there, and because that was the best place to put it at the time, because I just couldn't figure out. And though with the AUXBEAM system, the mounting bracket for the control module itself, or where you link everything into, it has a place that it can be placed on the Jeep, like through some of the factory bolts. In the space that I have in that parking garage, and with the limited tools I have, it was just easier to mount it here. This isn't a permanent mounting spot, but for now it's going to work and allow me to connect up my KC lights and some of the other things that I have planned for the Jeep, and then later on I can then move it. I have a spare fuse cover, but for now this is where I'm going to do it. It's going to allow me to make sure everything works the way I want it to, and I can go from there with it. So while I was mounting all this to the fuse cover, I decided that I wanted to use some of the bolts that came with it, but actually bolt it to the fuse cover so that it had a sturdier attachment point and not just screwed in to where it could easily get wiggled loose. I wanted the bolts to hold it in place, seeing as it wasn't the greatest spot, as it'll dip some, but at the moment, using what was provided and what I had, using those bolts was a very wise decision. It hasn't moved since I installed this, and I've been off-road with it, so I'm pretty happy with how it's installed on there, and it's not causing any harm to anything else around it. But I will say, trying to put those nuts on those bolts right in that small space, it did make it very interesting, and I am very thankful that I have some tools that are small enough to get within that gap to help tighten it all down and to just make it a stronger fitting. It was a tight squeeze, though in the video it doesn't look like it. I didn't want to break the cover, and I didn't want to mess things up. Not too worried about that, so can you shine it on my side more, towards my head, where this black flap is? Okay, now we're going to figure out how I want to place the lights. This was the lovely cutout that I made for the S-Pod. That fit the switches really well, but since that no longer wants to work, I'm going to reutilize it with this bracket. So I'm going to put this bracket here, which is going to recover up that hole really well, and I'm going to end up tapping it so that I can drill it in here, and then I'm going to stick the mount for the switches right there so that it can stick out. So we are going to start lining this up so that I can put this bracket here, cover up the hole, and then figure out where I want to put the switches, mark it, remove this, drill the hole for the switches, and then put those into place. Guys, so I've gotten the plate where I want to put it in the middle on the dash, or on the center console there, inside the Jeep. I just pulled it off. I like the way it got mocked up. I'll show you guys that in a second. But right now, I have pulled it off, and I am figuring out how I want this to sit to mark the holes to drill the holes to tap it to mount this thing in there. So still a work in progress. We're working on it, so we're gonna figure this.
So there is a story behind the hole in the middle console. So originally I had an S-Pod and I installed it and we couldn't figure out where to put it, and it didn't come with a mounting bracket, and so I wanted it hard mounted in the Jeep, and so we cut that hole in the center console because it was great. I could easily get it with my fingers. I knew what each switch had and it worked really well. But then there became an issue with the wiring harness on the S-Pod, and when I reached out to S-Pod to get it fixed, it became a debacle. Just the customer service wasn't super great at the time, and so I decided that I got the AUXBEAM system and was just going to fix it once and for all. So I had that hole. Well, when I got this AUXBEAM system and I had this mounting bracket, I decided I'm going to put this bracket over that hole and just be done with the problem I originally made.
Alright guys, we got the switch panel hooked up in here. I got this metal plate stuck over the one hole I did, tapped it through there, got this all nice and hooked up, drilled these two holes into this metal plate to mount this, which now can swivel, and it doesn't block the cup holder, we've checked. And then when we look inside here, turn this around, we have them right through there for now until I find washers. I'm going to use those to kind of just help it hold in place so it doesn't shake loose. But there's that wire sticking through there. And then we're going to go through this hole right down here, to wire that through, and then we can start hooking up all the wiring. But that's what's next, is the wiring. But this is in there. I'm really happy with it. Hey guys, we're out here on Golden Hour. This is day 2 of working on the Jeep. We're actually going to finish up all the wiring this evening and finish buttoning it up. Maybe a little louder in the garage because everybody's coming home from the weekend. So let's get started on finish buttoning up the Jeep. As I mentioned before, the kit comes with everything you need to wire it. It's got the positive and negative terminals. The other part that attaches to there is a ground wire, the last positive connection terminal, and then the positive breaker, which will all get connected right over there. Connect it right back in that spot. Y'all may be wondering, how am I going to work in here with it being a little dark? I am very happy that I installed the KC lights under the hood. So that's about as much light as I have at the moment. Now, I've got even more. So happy with these lights. Let's get wiring. Now we got that plastic casing on it, help protect it. Now we just need to figure out where it is that I would like to mount it. Alright guys, I was trying to figure out how I wanted to mount this thing. So the wires all have to run up through this point here. It allows all the wires in the box, otherwise the box is sealed, which is great. But then it comes to this big thing. Now it's a little hard to mount something that gets put right there anywhere else. So I figured, why not take this and take this opening hole and mount it next to this opening hole, which if I didn't have this camera in my hand, I could move this over and do it. But then I realized I had no more bolts. So I went over to the S-Pod, which keeps on giving, and have taken the last bolt and nut that I have from the S-Pod. So I am going to stick that bolt through there, slip it through this hole, and screw in the nut on the other side and have this connected right to this housing with everything else, and it'll look pretty clean. It won't be the best, but for now it'll be pretty clean until I figure out a more permanent area that I'd like to mount this thing. Because why not reuse holes and things that we've already made previously? If it fits, stick it there for now, see how it looks. We can always undo it. It's not like I'm drilling another hole in the system because it was already there within the cover itself. So let's see what that looks like. Alright, quick update. I've got the positive and negative connected through. I got this connected up to the fuse box. We are going to now wire the two ends to the battery connectors. And then we will plug this cable, which runs to the actual switches. Focus here. Aha, this cable. Plug it right in here, and then we will see if we get power to the switches. So let's finish wiring this. Okay, we got the positive hooked up. I had to bore out the line. I had to drill out the hole more to actually fit onto the positive connector terminal. But that is all in now. Okay, all the stuff I had to do to the right, boring out this piece, I had to do to, or what I had to do to the positive, I had to do to the negative. So I just sat there for 10 minutes boring this out with the drill. It's very, very stubborn, but I have gotten it done. Full install for this system, it's been very simple. That is my one complaint. Having to bore out the positive and negative terminals to fit onto the terminals, the areas. That was annoying. But let's plug this in and see if it actually comes to life now. Alright guys, let's see if all that hard work paid off. Yes! We have power. It's fantastic. Alright, we have power. This is fantastic, guys. I love how I can adjust this, swivel it any way I need to. But there we go. We have our AUXBEAM system. Look at it glowing.